And ladies and gentlemen, the bad news is it's getting worse. 2018 was the worst year on record for ATC performance across Europe. In January of 2019, it got worse yet again. Now, January is not a busy month for flights across Europe, and yet 90% of all delays in the month of January, and it looks like extending into February as well, were accounted for by air traffic control delays, primarily short staffing in Karlsruhe and in Marseille in the south of France. The purpose of A4E, though, is not just to complain about the services, it's to come up with practical solutions that we expect the EU authorities to implement. And we're continuing to call for action, urgent action, because as it gets worse, and it will be particularly bad here in April, May, June this summer, we need to keep focusing on how we can improve the situation. So, what are the solutions A4E have put forward? We need to minimise the impact from local strikes. In that respect, we want the EU to separate the overflights, the upper airspace, from the lower airspace, so that overflights are not compromised when, for example, the French air traffic controllers go on strike. French local labour law protects about 70% of the French flights. It's the overflights between Ireland and Italy, between the UK and Spain, between Portugal and Poland that get cancelled. They have nothing to do with the French ATC strike. So we need to separate the upper airspace. We have to make air traffic control providers more efficient. We need to shorten the time. It takes 3 years to train an air traffic controller. We can train pilots to become captains in a faster time than they can train air traffic controllers. In many respects, they're operating on different computer systems. They should be operating on the same computer system. The training period should be shortened to 6 months because we need an urgent delivery on this issue. We're calling for more measures to manage the network centrally. In the US, air traffic control is managed through a central command. We believe Eurocontrol should have a similar power here, so that where you have an ATCO or an ATM provider, as in Germany, not providing the service that they have contracted to provide, they can move some of that capacity in some of those flights to other across to other countries. So you reward the countries that are efficient and that can produce, and you penalise the countries, most notably Germany and France at the moment, where we're having delivery problems. We need to implement cross-border airspace, so that instead of on a Dublin to Athens flight we have to zigzag across 24 different national ATC spaces. We can fly much more direct, much more efficiently, saving time for our customers and also reducing the amount of fuel and CO2 emissions that flight will operate. We, above all, must introduce competition between ANSPs. Competition between the airlines in the last 30 years has transformed air travel around Europe. Fares have come down, services have increased, the quality of services has improved immeasurably, and yet we haven't rolled out that liberalisation to the ANSP providers. That's the way forward. Let's introduce more competition so that if Ryanair wants to contract with the Germans, we can do so directly and let them provide the ATC services if they can do it more efficiently than others. The last 2 points: we need to establish independent economic regulation for the ANSPs, so that, for example, where the DFS are lamentably failing to provide services in Karlsruhe, they are penalised, their income is reduced. And lastly, and above all, we must now urgently allow the airlines to recover our EU 261 expenses from the ATM providers. We have this ridiculous situation where, fine, we all support passenger rights, we pay hundreds of millions of euros a year in terms of right to care costs, compensation for delays and flight cancellations, when 90% of these delays are being caused by ANSP providers. Yet when we go to recover our costs in France or in Germany, the ANSPs have an immunity from prosecution. So we're left picking up the tab for our customers, and yet the people who are daily causing these delays have an immunity for prosecution. The next Commission, the next Parliament must redraft the EU 261 provisions so that we can claim that compensation back from the ATM providers, because it's only by financially penalising those service providers will we force them or encourage them to become more efficient and to deliver the services that we're paying for. Carsten. No, sorry, Johann.
Yeah.